Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. Today I'm going to be continuing the build of the new 1/24 scale Airfix Spitfire. If you've not seen part 1, I'll link it above here. As I mentioned there, I'm building this straight out of the box with no added items at all to show you exactly what the base kit is capable of. Again, I'm going to try to follow the kit instructions as much as possible, but I will jump about a bit where it's more practical to do so, and I'll try to call out why as I go along. Before I get into that though, I wanted to mention a few things. Firstly, a huge thank you to those of you who have subscribed to the channel, and I hope that if you're one of the approximately 90% who watch my videos without subscribing, that I'll earn your sub by the end of this video. If you do subscribe, make sure to set the notification bell to all so you don't miss any future videos as well. Secondly, there have been a lot of comments on what materials and tools I use and where you can get those. I do have an Amazon store linked in the video notes below for all of those things, and if you order anything through that link at all, I do get a small commission which I put back into the channel, so that really helps me out. On the subject of comments, I really appreciate your engagement with the channel through these. I do read them all and try to reply to them all in a reasonable time frame too. Please do keep the comments coming, though I won't be changing any valid English pronunciations I make, however amusing to an international audience they may be, decals being the most popular one, but I do try to take any constructive criticism, suggestions and ideas on board. Lastly, I do have both a Patreon and YouTube memberships for the channel if you'd like to support me directly. These give you some additional benefits such as behind the scenes video content, access to my Discord server, merch and so on, and I'll also be doing regular giveaways for kits, hobby tools and the like. The big one for this year is for every 75 Patrons or channel memberships, I'll be giving away one of these Airfix 1/24 scale Spitfire kits, so if you like what you see here and have a couple of pounds a month to donate, you could end up being lucky and owning this kit. All that aside, let's get on with the build. We pick up today by going back to step 32, which is the start of the rear fuselage and tailwheel well assembly. This has a very large positive fit area and goes on without any issue in alignment. We then jump forward to step 43 to put the tail wheel well onto the fuselage, which locates positively against a prominent ridge, before bringing the second half of the rear fuselage into place at step 33. I generally use a cement-like Revel contactor here to give me a longer working time. At this point, I need to address the fuselage seam in front of the cockpit from last time, and in order to do this, I'm masking off the area with Tamiya tape and also masking off the cockpit to prevent dust ingress from the upcoming sanding. I can then use sprue goo to fill the gaps along this join without it getting onto large areas of the fuselage and risk losing any detail. After drying overnight, I can then remove the masking tape around the seam, leaving a thin line of raised plastic I can carefully trim down with a sharp scalpel. I'm taking care here to cut away from the fuselage wherever possible to minimise the possibility of mishaps. I'm also trying to preserve the sharp edges towards the cockpit and around the fuel filler cap. Once that's done, a light and careful directed sanding with a 400 grit sanding stick smooths the join. I'm then using Mr. Surfacer 500 over the seam. This removes any optical bias and fills in any small imperfections, unifying the area so we can spot any inconsistencies left. As we can paint it on, we can also avoid the engraved detail too. I want to make sure this seam doesn't crack at some later point in the construction, so I'm going to use some sprue goo under the join just to give it a bit more support. Not strictly necessary, but really just for my peace of mind. We then go to step 47, which is the point we got to in construction last time. This adds the firewall to the front fuselage, which is a nice snug fit on testing. As I did all the painting previously, of course, we need to prepare the join by scraping away all the overspray from these areas before attaching this with Tamiya Extra Thin. Step 48 brings us to the horizontal stabilisers, and as you guys voted for option C in terms of finish for this Spitfire, I'm completing 48C and 48D. The pieces go together easily and with positive fit, and are handed, so it's difficult to get any of this bit wrong. Some more Tamiya Extra Thin and we're done. Step 49 deals with the control surfaces for the stabilisers, and these are a little more fiddly because of the trim tabs, so I'm using contactor here to give me a bit more leeway. I found the easiest way to do this was to lightly tack the surfaces together and then insert the trim tab before firming up. As I'm dealing with control surfaces, I jumped ahead to 52 to make the rudder, which is similar to the other control surfaces in construction. Now I am keeping the control surfaces off for the moment, but I do go ahead to 54 to attach the rudder actuator. This sits in a depression in the port side of the rudder and is secured with more Tamiya Extra Thin, before checking the alignment, which is perfect, before setting aside to dry. Stepping back to stage 50, I'm now attaching the horizontal stabilisers, again using contactor to give me that strength and extended working time. Now as I mentioned, the stabilisers are handed and only fit on one way, so there's no possibility of getting them on the wrong side, but they do need a bit of firm handling to get them fully engaged and aligned, so there are minimal gaps on both sides. You can see I'm checking the fit and alignment from all sides and angles here to make sure that these are absolutely correct before moving on. Step 51 deals with attaching the control surfaces, but I'm just checking alignment here for fit for the future and just leaving them off for now. At step 55 we now move on to the main wing, and the first thing we need to do is remove these lugs from the starboard wing root. I'm just carving them off with my scalpel and then sanding the area to flat. That done, we can add the two pieces that act as the root attachment points of the flaps. These go onto the wing without problem, but it's worth making sure they're dry before moving on, as they are starting to add form and structure to the wing itself. The next step adds the two undercarriage attachment points into the wing spar, which are a nice snug fit and easily secured. Step 57 sees us place the wing root cord framework into the spar as a jig, but we're not cementing anything here. What we are cementing separately in step 58 are the components making up the main wheel bay. These all fit sequentially and perfectly thanks to good tabs, engineering and moulding. Step 59 adds the wall to the undercarriage leg bay. And then 60 adds the previously constructed wheel bay assembly. At this point, again, we're still not gluing anything, it's just all held together by friction fit alone. Steps 61 to 64 then do exactly the same thing for the starboard side wheel bays. This brings us to step 65, where we're gluing all of these assemblies down to the lower wing. Now as the instructions state, it's best to tackle this one side at a time and make sure everything is aligned and glued correctly before moving on to the other side. This is actually a lot easier than it sounds, and using Tamiya Extra Thin with a slightly larger brush made short work of this step. We then move to the outer wing chord pieces, adding a fiddly bit to one in step 66, this is repeated to the other side in step 69. Another fiddly pipe is added to another chord section in step 67 for the port wing, and 70 for the starboard. Step 68 and 71 form the Hispano Cannon ammunition belt feed storage system, which is simple and painless to assemble. Step 72 then brings these prepared wing chord assemblies, together with the other wing chord sections, onto the main wing assembly. This is more fiddly to set up than to complete, as everything locates well. The only ones needing any help are the end sections, which are only supported from one side, unlike the others which slot into the main wing spar. Step 73 adds the Hispano ammo tray and a bulkhead, both of which are simple. Step 74, however, is probably one of the hardest in the whole wing assembly, because piece F37 has to slot into both the spar and a channel in the wing at the same time, and itself is rather thin and flexible, as you can see. I found the easiest way to do this was to hold it located in the wing channel, then push the end until it snapped into the wing spar. The other part of this step is also annoyingly fiddly, being the Browning machine gun support on the outer wing, which is best inserted from the underside, something I discovered after about 6 attempts from above. By contrast, the serpentine hose in step 75 is pretty straightforward to attach into place, positively locating on lugs at either end. The other part of this hose needs tweezers to get into place, but locates easily due to the design of the ends. Steps 77 to 81 deal with the same components but on the starboard wing, and once complete, the wing has gained a lot of rigidity and shape and is starting to look pretty good. Step 82 isn't relevant to our version, so we move straight on to 83, where we put in the port Hispano cannon. This is easily pushed through the spar and then back into a locating channel, though I'm not cementing these until after painting. Step 84 constructs the 2-piece clockwork ammunition feed mechanism, which the instructions advise to fit only if you're keeping the wing panels open. This is not advisory. The wing panels will not fit at all if you put these pieces on in step 85, as they're actually higher than the wing panels themselves. As I found out because I want to be able to display them both open and closed. They do look quite nice with a test wing fitting though, but they will need substantial altering if you want that flexibility. You have been warned. Before we get into the Browning machine gun mounts, I wanted to open up the barrels of these items, so made a starting nick in the centre and then used my wow stick and its smallest bit to drill out the end. As I wanted to see if you could really go to town on these, I also tried drilling the entire length of them and then coming in from the sides where the cooling vents are with a 0.35mm pin vise bit to open these out as well, and it's absolutely possible. So if you want to super detail this kit, then you don't have to go with aftermarket items to get that open barrel effect. However, you can't actually see the barrels at all, even with the panels open, so I'm not going to do that. Okay, so back to the instruction sequence, and we have the mount and ammunition feed for one of the Brownings, which is a bit fiddly due to the size of the parts and delicate size of the mounting areas on the gun, but not difficult. Step 87 does the same as 86 with the other Browning machine gun, with a slightly different mount in this position. These two assemblies are then brought into the main wing, which is a simple slide through the spar and drop of the brackets into place. Again, I'm not cementing these as I'm going to do that after painting, but a test fit of the top wing again gives a foretaste of how things are going to look. All of these steps are of course repeated for the opposite wing in 89 to 94. I'm jumping ahead to step 101 now to make the oil coolers, since the other steps deal with assembling the wing and panels, which I'm not going to do at this stage until I've painted everything. The oil coolers themselves are nicely cast and are handed, with very clear indications of which side and orientation they are, which is a nice touch. They go together with no vices at all. Step 102 brings the oil cooler into its fairing. And step 103 brings the sides onto these. No real issues here, just keep an eye on the alignment at the edges. We also have all the same steps for the other cooler, and since everything is handed and well labelled, there's no issue with making these side by side. What's more of an issue, however, are the ejector pin marks that exist in the inner surfaces of these parts. If you have them closed, you're unlikely to see them, but they are quite close to the edges, and if you're having them open, as I am, or you're really examining the model, you might pick them out. I edged on the side of caution and decided to fill them using a thinner sprue glue. When dry, this is sanded down and then Mr. Surfacer 500 painted on, as here, before a final sanding to get it a nice smooth surface ready for painting. This gave me an opportunity to skip ahead again and put the small pipes in the lower wing by the oil coolers. Step 109 deals with the starboard wing with just a single pipe, whereas 110 deals with the port wing and 2 pipes. As with some of the other steps, these are a little fiddly due to the size of the parts, but not difficult. The last pieces I'm going to cover today are the wingtips, which are covered in steps 112 and 113. These are simple 2-part pieces with locating tabs, which cement together with no issues. At this stage, I'm not putting transparencies on. Now this of course leaves us at a slightly unsatisfactory point with a half-assembled wing with a bunch of bits, but I want to cover painting and assembly of this together, which I'll do after the next section, which will be the engine. So this part of the build feels very procedural, as you're essentially crafting the Spitfire wing structure together with not a lot of detail steps or satisfying painting. All of the lovely rivet detail tends to be on the external structures, so you're not seeing much of that here. What there is in the wheel wells is great, but it's not very prominent for this part of the build. There are some ejector pin marks to fill in areas that can be seen, and if you want to really show off the interior of the wing fully, there are some there too that I didn't bother with here since they are mostly hidden by the Hispanos, but not entirely so. There are also some build choices that will seem frustrating to many, especially the Hispanos and their wing covers, which I'll cover in part 4 when the whole aircraft comes together. If you're not bothered about the gun details, then almost everything you build here will be locked away inside the wings, so it feels a bit wasted. I think you're probably not buying this kit if that's how you intend to build it. Still, the overall theme of some fiddly bits but nothing daunting covers this entire build section. Let's see if the engine has the same feel next time. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.